Hey there, what's up, everybody? Welcome to Evoke Greatness. This podcast was created for those of you who, like me, are driven by their curious nature and fascination with the champion mindset. If you have an insatiable hunger for growth and knowledge, or maybe you're just curious on how some of the most successful people have navigated their journey, we share the ups and the downs, the highs and the lows, and all the lessons learned along the way. It doesn't matter what chapter you are on in your story. Maybe you're just getting started, or heck, maybe you're halfway through. What I know is where intention goes, energy flows. It's my most sincere hope that you will hear something in one or maybe many of these episodes that resonates with you and reminds you that you are not in this alone. As we venture into year 2, I hope that you find a sense of connection and community when you're here, because we all deserve a place where we belong. My name is Sunny, and I am so glad you're here. If you're new, there's a few things you want to know about me. I am a huge book nerd and a wee bit of a control enthusiast with an obsession for motivational coffee cups. I believe that a rising tide raises all ships, and I invite you along in this journey to evoke greatness. Welcome back to another episode of Evoke Greatness. Today, I'm thrilled to welcome Summer Davies. Her journey led her from a challenging upbringing in Boulder, Colorado, to an unexpected dive into leadership. She highlights the power of adaptability and passion. Initially drawn to a life with horses, Summer's path took a sharp turn when she found herself in an unplanned leadership role. This pivotal moment ignited her passion for developing effective and skillful leaders, regardless of whether they're at the beginning of their leadership journey or looking to refine their skills. Summer's expertise extends to tackling the nuances of micromanagement, offering invaluable insights into fostering trust and autonomy within teams. Her story is not just about leadership, it's about embracing life's unexpected turns and the lessons they teach us. Prepare to be inspired by Summer and her insights into building foundational leadership for lasting impact. Summer, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a privilege to be here.
I always love to start off on the story that led up to kind of the current version of where you are today. You know, as you think about how your upbringing started, fast forwarding into a leadership role that was really unexpected, what was it that compelled you along the way and kind of gave you this feel for maybe I'm not going to go the route of equestrian or caring for horses, right? Maybe I'm actually going to take this transition and hook a right into leadership.
You know, I've answered that question many times, and I feel like the answer kind of evolves as I have new experiences and reflect in a different way on the way that I got here. And the reality is I never really truly appreciated the magnitude of the decisions I was making in the moment when I was making them. And that's, I think, kind of the nature of life, that you don't always know what's going to come from the choices that you're making. But if I look back at the many twists and turns and pivotal moments that have brought me here, it's always been a common theme of just looking at what's possible, keeping an optimistic mindset when looking at whatever is facing you, and in as many cases as possible, saying yes to something that feels like an absolute yes. When you have an opportunity in front of you, and even if it makes no sense to anyone else, and even maybe makes no sense to you, but you've got that feeling of like, this is something I should do, saying yes to it, and then just going all in on it has been the theme of the good decisions I've made that have brought me to where I am.
How do you go about, I love just even that phrase of looking at what's possible. It's something that I talk a lot about myself, similar, journey of just like actually getting to a place of recognizing for myself what was possible. And then that opens up and allows you to help other people see what's possible. So I'm curious, when you think about that, like what has you in a situation look at something with a lens of exploration and possibility?
I think I'm lucky in that I am an eternal optimist, and I do believe that things can have a really good outcome if you just work for it. So I'll share a story with you about my early leadership journey, and it was kind of that watershed moment that made my career go into leadership development in general. And I was really young. I was about 24 years old, and I'd been looking for an opportunity for what I might call like a real job. And I was given the opportunity to run a veterinary hospital. And when I interviewed for the job, it was kind of off the cuff. I didn't really know that was what was coming. And when I got the job, they said, we'd love for you to come in. I said yes because I thought, oh, this seems really cool. But I really didn't know what I was saying yes to. And I was in charge of the hospital. I was in charge of the entire operations and management of a veterinary hospital. And I'd been around animals and animal medicine my whole career, but really running the show, I had no business doing. No experience, no business doing. And it took me only a few weeks to like run it into the ground and really make it a really negative situation because I didn't know what I was doing. And I had this moment where one of my veterinarians, who was a new grad, should have been in the place where she was the most optimistic, the most enthusiastic and positive about her career, was spending her lunch breaks crying in her car. And she was crying in her car because she hated coming to work every day. And I knew for sure this is me. This is, I'm creating this situation. I didn't really know why or how, but I knew it was me. And just having that moment of like, this isn't what I want it to be. This isn't what anyone wants it to be. And I know it's possible to make it better. I don't know how, but I know that there are answers out there. And I know if we go looking for them, we'll find them. So I literally did go looking for them and found them and made a career out of it. And just that moment of looking around and saying, if this isn't what I want, I'm the only one who's here to fix it. So let's figure out how to fix it and do something different and know that it is possible to make this better, different, whatever the right definition of what you're looking for is.
That brings me to a place where I think about once you discover self-awareness in leadership, and it's a monumental event. And I just think back to my early days where I had zero self-awareness, made a ton of mistakes because I was looking out the world just through my own lens, right? And how everything impacted me. And I think so often in leadership, we may not be taught this concept or this idea around self-awareness, but you talk about what that kind of looked like as you described that situation of getting to a place where you're saying, hold on, I need to take a step back here and assess the situation. How do you think new leaders who may have no idea, like what are some of those things that they can do to cause themselves to actually kind of say, hey, time out for a minute. I'm going to step back from my current environment and I'm going to assess the situation to figure out, am I taking the appropriate steps from a leadership perspective, right? Or maybe I should course correct a little bit here.
Oh man, this is like the $1 million question, right? It's so difficult to describe to somebody. How do you become more self-aware? And I think it's important to call out, as you probably know, going through life, becoming more self-aware isn't a singular moment. It's not like you reach enlightenment and now you've got it and you have all the answers, keys to the kingdom. It is an evolution. And every single day you find moments where you're like, oh, there I am again. I've got this appreciation of something that's going on. So it is an evolution. And for many folks, they feel like, well, how do I know if I've even started evolving down that road or not? The question that I encourage people to ask, and it's a difficult one to do. So if your listeners are hearing this, they're probably going to listen to it and be like, ugh, I'm not sure that I want to sit with that. If we think about that evolution of need, the question that I encourage people to ask of themselves is something that may not feel super comfortable to ask. So your listeners may say, oh, I'm not sure if I want to ask this, but I would encourage them to sit with it for a little bit to explore how well do you know yourself? And the question is, how am I creating this? So whether it's a experience, a circumstance, a pattern that you're noticing, whatever it is. So maybe it's at work and you're seeing that your team is hitting the same problem over and over and over again. And you're thinking, gosh, what is going on with these guys? Why do we keep having this problem? If instead, then you ask, how am I creating this? It may start to force you to look at what are the behavioral parts in my team that I'm not addressing? What are the training pieces that I need to offer more of? What am I bringing to the circumstance that's causing this pattern to come up over and over again? And then on the other side, in moments where you say, oh man, I really like this part of my life. I really enjoy the way my mornings are going, or I really enjoy the way this relationship in my life is going. Asking that same question, how am I creating this? What is it that I'm doing in these moments that's creating what I like so that I can do more of that in my experience? So I encourage people to use that question to start getting to some self-awareness. And then Sunny, the next piece that I would say is you can get self-aware, but the next step of evolution is self-appreciation. So getting to a place where you feel like, okay, I'm aware of who I am. Maybe I'm working on the bits that are creating patterns or creating outcomes that I'm not comfortable with or I don't like. And I'm really leaning into those pieces that I do like to be more of that authentic leader so that that self-awareness really slices both ways into the places where you want to be more self-aware and maybe manage that a little bit more carefully, and the places where you're like, "God, that's something I really like about myself. I want to do more of that and embrace that part of my personality."
I love that. How do you think, so for organizations where, say, there's a culture issue, right? And they're trying to
Mhm.
kind of turn a ship, and that's not a ship you turn overnight. We know that. But oftentimes that requires the executive team, the leadership team to come together. What guidance, I guess, would you give around having a team do that? Because that can be a very vulnerable process to go through. When we think about taking ownership and onus of how we are adding to this situation, whatever this may be, how would you encourage leaders to show up to do that in a way where it is like, hey, if we're going to turn this around, we all need to get around the table and do this process?
Yeah, this is a really good one. And I know a lot of executive teams are battling with this. It's been an interesting 5 years, right? And a lot of executive teams, C-suites are coming to the table and looking around and saying, this is kind of a defining moment where we want to address some of these big, hairy problems and define how we're going to be going forward. So great, great moment. The first question that I think is more important to ask before they ask, how are we creating this, whatever it is why are we a team? Why do we work together? Other than the fact that we all organizationally on a chart somewhere roll up to the same person or have the same circle around us or whatever the case might be, why are we a team? What is it that we need to achieve together that we couldn't do as individual entities? Because arguably we could just change the org chart and all go do it ourselves. But if we've all shown up in this group together, what is it about this group of people, whether that's the scope of influence that we have, whether that's the skill set or the authority that we collectively have? What is it that makes us a team? And why is there value in us being a team of people answering that question of how are we creating this and then finding solutions together? And the answer might be there is no reason. Maybe we shouldn't be a team. And then we go to an individual solution situation. And perhaps the answer is there's something really unique and value added by the collective. Let's use that to drive the next bit of questions.
Yeah, then that really engages each person to
Mhm.
have a sense of responsibility in the actual process itself to really moving the dial.
Ah, I love what you've said there because that's it, right? Otherwise, it can be a little easy for some folks to maybe kind of hide in the background or feel like, you all have defined that you're creating that, but that's not me. I'm not a part of that. And then on the other side, there may be some folks who lean really heavily into that and take up more than their share of oxygen in the room and more than their share of the solutioning, which may then not encourage the diversity of thought and perspective that is needed because of the team.
Right. Well,
Mhm.
transitioning to leadership often comes with, its own set of challenges. What advice would you like to give someone who suddenly found themselves in the leadership position, much like you did?
Oh man, so this is the meat and potatoes of what I see the most of as a struggle in leadership. And the interesting thing I just want to call it before I answer that question is many folks feel like they are alone in that experience of I've landed in this seat. I'm so jazzed because they've given me this opportunity. I'm feeling really honored by it. I want to prove that they've made the right decision to put me in this seat. And then my research has shown, and there's lots of other research out there that can confirm this, that so many people have that experience and hide it because they want to really shine in and prove that they are the right selection. So the advice that I would give is stop hiding it. Don't pretend like you've got it all figured out, because that is an entirely unrealistic expectation of humanity. The skills for the majority, I mean, there might be an exception here or there, but the majority of people, the skills that you needed to be a high potential performer as an individual contributor, whatever role you were in, are very different than the skills you need to lead a team. You probably had to deliver on your own projects, prioritize your own work, complete your own tasks. Maybe there was some collaboration, but that's a really different skill. And it was probably a functional skill. If you're a marketer, you were the best marketeer. If you are now the leader of the team of marketers, being the best marketeer is an irrelevant skill. That you don't need to be that anymore. And nobody has that conversation of being a superstar in this function is no longer really that value add in this role. Now we need you to be able to prioritize work for others, delegate tasks in an efficient and engaging way. That one's a doozy. Give feedback, develop others, flex your style, be self-aware. All these things are brand new. And there isn't a life experience that would have collectively given you that. So it is an unrealistic expectation that you would have all that. But most folks feel a burning need to hide the fact that they don't have that. And then they bumble and fumble along. Maybe they figure it out. They've got a great mentor. They get some of those skills in place. Maybe they don't. And then they just end up with this experience that's a little bit painful as they go along in the early days of leadership, which is really quite unfair.
I'm glad that you said that about it being lonely, because you really do. It's almost a bit of an isolating thing. And you wouldn't think that being on the other side of it, right? Not being a leader yet, you're excited to get to that space. And I have found that it's typically a position comes open and you were a rock star fill in the blank in your current position. And so it just makes sense, right? That you'll go into this and you'll excel just as much as you did there. And what I have found is often that the position lacks training, right? There's almost an unspoken expectation that this person's going to know exactly what to do. So I'm curious, with your experience, the leaders you've worked with, what are some of those other pitfalls that you have seen people step into, around stepping into a new leadership role? And, maybe it's assumptions around something, maybe it's the hiding piece that you talked about. But what are some of those other things that people have experienced that you've worked with?
Yeah, the loneliness is definitely number one, because emotionally that's difficult to manage. And there's all sorts of reasons for that. The other one is one of the most common things I see organizations come to me with, and it is increasing at an alarming rate, is a prevalence of micromanagement. It is that individual was moved into that leadership role. And I think this is really important to call out, because they are micromanaging out of an excess of good intention. So they're not doing it because they are bad people or they have malicious intent or they are waking up in the morning, unless you've got sociopaths on your team, which is a really different problem to manage. They're not waking up in the morning being like, I want to run every aspect of my people's day. I'm going to second guess everything they do. I'm going to belittle their decisions. And I'm going to disable their ability to solve problems independently. That's my goal. Like, nobody's saying that, right? Instead, they're thinking, gosh, I'm struggling. My team's struggling. What's going on? Well, I have this skill set that was value add in the past. I'm just going to reapply what worked in the past, which was my skill set as an individual contributor. And then that becomes very quickly micromanagement. And it is an excess of good intention in absence of skill. If that individual had the ability to effectively prioritize work for others and delegate in an engaging way, they wouldn't do that. If they understood your job is now to stop being a doer and enable other doers and help your team add value in a way that's far greater than you could do individually. And that may include some mentoring, that may include sharing your own experiences and ideas, but largely it's unlocking the experiences and ideas of others. That's a skill set, and they just don't have it. And so they rely on the skill set that they do have. And so I see this happening so much, especially in the last 2 years, because folks just have not received that level of development as a leader to be able to have those skills to effectively lead others.
So what happens when it's all well intended, right? But we step into this leadership role and then fast forward 15 years and nobody's
Mm,
ever made the call out around our leadership. And so we've been micromanaging for 15 years. What
mhm,
what has been your experience in helping people unlearn and unpack some of that so that they really can step into more of a transformational turnaround in their own leadership and how they lead people?
mm. So the first and the most important thing is you have to have an organizational and a team level understanding that there isn't any shame or there shouldn't be any shame around somebody learning what might be deemed foundational skills later in the game. They didn't have the chance to learn it. So it's not really something we want to create a negative circumstance around, although there is a lot of negativity around that. So the first space is to just acknowledge this is an excess of good intention. We think you're a well-intended manager and we want to help you be the manager you intend to be. Making that really, really clear so that there is some safety and some acceptance so that somebody doesn't have to just be struggling alone. First, most important, non-negotiable. You've got to get that in place. The second one is that self-awareness, helping somebody understand how is your behavior, well-intended or not, impacting the ability of your team to perform. And for many folks at this level, so if you're sitting in the seat of being a leader yourself and wondering, gosh, maybe this is me, or if you're in an organization and you're like, oh, I think this is going on in my organization, I want you to help with this. Metrics can be really helpful. So pulling out and saying, well, let's look at what your turnover looks like. In instances where we have ongoing higher than desired turnover, this could be the problem. It's a great indicator. In instances where you see continuing drops in innovation, where people are stopping bringing new ideas to the table.
Mhm.
A lot of times we see micromanagement as the cause. Looking at instances where you have situations where people aren't problem solving for themselves. They're expecting their managers to solve all their problems. That's another great place to go. So if you don't have data and statistic around that one, a simple question to ask is, how often do you respond to your team with a question versus a solution? And I encourage managers, if they're wondering about this themselves and they want a simple way to do this, get yourself a piece of paper or a notebook and say, okay, over the next 3 days, I'm going to just keep a log of every time somebody comes to me with a problem that they need solved. Something's going on in the organization. They've got a problem. They've got a question, something. How often do I solve the problem for them by giving them the information or telling them how to fix it? And how often do I respond with a question that would unlock information for them to be able to solve it themselves? And if the answer is that you solve the problem for them or give them the information more often than you ask the question, you might be micromanaging. That is just a really simple way to say what's happening in real life.
And that kind of almost reverts back to what we were talking about like the exploration and what is possible, because that's a twofold. It's really that process. It's a win-win, right? If
Mhm.
you are discovering something about yourself and your own leadership in ways in which you can become better, foster better relationships with your team, turn the team or organization around, that is literally leaning into what is possible here. If I'm willing to make X changes or modifications in how I lead, what does that make possible? And that should be like exhilarating for someone.
Yeah. And I love that other question. I think you can kind of fold into that of maybe we're asking the first question of how am I creating this? And if the answer is something that you're like, well, I'm not really happy with what I'm creating and I'm doing these things to do it. And then following that up with what might be possible if I changed that behavior or if I was able to unlock this for this person. And that creates this vision of possibility in big circumstances and in little ones to say there is so much potential to turn things into what I want them to be. And it can be anything, right? And you can get crazy with that question. You can say, what might be possible if we did this? Sky's the limit. Let's, use that as your inspiration, as your rocket fuel to say, okay, that inspires me because now I can think of the possibility if I address how am I creating this in a real way. That can be a really great cycle to help people keep in that really positive mindset of this is all for the benefit of my team, the people around me, and most importantly, my experience as a leader.
And building those foundational leadership skills, regardless of what stage you're at, right? It's almost like an ongoing process. You're polishing and refining your skill sets. But what are some core practices or habits that you believe every leader should develop, regardless of how long they've been, in their role or how long they've been a leader?
So I'm going to answer this with a little bit of an example, because I think you're tapping into something so important here. So I've been riding since I was 8. I am 42. So you can do the math on how many years I've been riding horses. And I've worked with top level trainers all over the country. I've had the chance to train and do all sorts of things in Europe. Right. So I've had lots of training, and I still take a lesson every single week with my trainer, because continuing to stay in a growth mindset around your skills is incredibly important. And I had my riding lesson earlier this week, and I said to my trainer, hey, I really want to I'm working on this really harder skill. Let's have a lesson that pushes a little bit. And she said, fantastic. Ride a circle. And I said, ride a circle. You serious? And she's like, yeah, ride a perfect, well-balanced circle. And I'm somebody who's been riding for such an amazing amount of time. My horse is fantastic. I'm not the best in the whole wide world by any stretch of the imagination, but like a circle, come on, man. And it was one of the hardest lessons I've ever had, because coming back to that foundation of, can you stay balanced? Can you keep everything in a perfect circle is incredibly hard. And leadership is exactly the same thing. Coming back to that foundation over and over again, whether you've been doing it for 5 minutes or 15 years, coming back and saying, can I do the foundational, most simple things really, really well? If the answer is no, I've got work to do there, well, then we can't do the harder things. So we've got to come back to those again and again. And it's so easy to lose those foundational skills, and to come back and perfect those is a really critical part of the practice. So I would say for anyone, no matter where you are in your leadership skills, I've got a handful of things that I think are the most important. And it's not just my opinion. It's based on tons of research and data that you can check out there, or I can share some of the research as well. But they are the first and most important thing that leaders need to be able to do is answer, why am I a leader? And you should be able to answer that question, whether you were promoted yesterday or you're going to retire tomorrow. Why am I leading people? This is a conscious choice, and I make an impact on people's lives that is greater than their physician. There's a recent study that confirms that the behavior of a manager has a greater impact on the physical well-being of their direct reports than their physician does. So being really clear about why have I chosen to sit in this seat and have that impact on people, absolutely critical. So first, why am I a leader? Be able to answer that clearly and concisely and in a way that is authentic to you. And it doesn't need to be authentic to anybody else. It just has to be meaningful to you. Once you've got that clear, then can I prioritize tasks for others? This is different than, can I prioritize my own tasks, or do I understand the priorities of the organization? This is, can I articulate to someone else what the priority of tasks are? Can I delegate work in alignment with that ability to prioritize tasks? And can I delegate work in alignment with the skill set, needs, and desires of my team? So then we get into some really complicated and meaty stuff, but just start with that prioritization and delegation. Then the next bit is, can I give effective feedback? Feedback is one of the places that I hear managers say, this causes me more anxiety, more sleepless nights, more concern than any other part of my work, giving effective, actionable feedback. Can I actually do that? That's a really big skill. Can I flex my style? Do I know what my style is? And then can I adjust it based on the needs of the individual or the circumstance I'm presenting with? And then the last one is, can I develop others? Do I know what it means to grow and develop others? And am I actively doing that? If you can do those foundational skills, you're in a really pretty good place. But again, those are things that leaders should be coming back to time and time again, just like, can you ride in a circle? Ask that question, test those skills, and really consider it over and over again as you go along in your leadership journey.
Yeah, it's a tremendous list. And I would encourage everyone to go back 45 seconds and go back and write these questions down. Really write those questions down and get introspective. Because what's the opportunity there? That you can actually dig a little deeper into yourself, that you can maybe make a few tweaks in some areas that you feel compelled to make those tweaks in. And then what does that make possible, right? I can show up as a better leader. I can show up as a more supportive, relational, engaged leader. I can give feedback in a way that allows the recipient to really receive it. Like all of these things, if you're willing to do the work on them, have an upside. You know,
Absolutely.
if things aren't going great, then how's that working for you?
And you know what? I would say one of the best things that I've ever heard is this too shall pass. So if you're in a place where you're saying things aren't going great, well, this too shall pass. Let's use these questions. Let's get through it. But similarly, if things are going great, this too shall pass. So use these questions to come back and say, what is working so I can perpetuate this success? What is maybe coming up in the future and how can I get ready for that? Because we know great times are great and they will pass and you will have times when things are harder. And that's not intended to be a stick that people can go around beating themselves up with at all, but rather just an opportunity to just ground yourself in your practice of being a leader and keep your eye on those foundational things that can start to slip, as everyone has those moments. But that's just a great way to come back to, oh gosh, I have really forgotten about the development plans for my team. It's been a busy quarter. It's been a busy year, whatever. I'm going to come back to that. I'm going to just reinvigorate that piece because I've come away from it, or whatever comes up for you as you go through thinking through those questions.
Yeah. And I think one thing that I would add to that is how open are you to feedback? How often are you asking for feedback? So often we're in a position as a leader to be providing feedback, but how often are we asking for feedback? And that opens you up to hearing some things that aren't always positive, but having trust enough within who you're asking that of. And maybe that's a peer, maybe that's up of your boss, and maybe that's of your team, your people. And I will tell you, there's no more powerful question than really asking with the intention to hear it. How are things going? What can I be doing better or differently to support you? That was a question that I used to ask my team is, what can I be doing better or differently to support you? That gives space for them to share some things that you could do better or differently. So take that for what it is. Really, I mean, that's gold, right? And it's having the trust and that relationship to be able to accept it and again, get introspective and listen to that. What can you do with that? Again, just an upside.
Absolutely. And the build on I would add is if the first time you go to your team and you say, what can I be doing better or differently to help you? If their answer is nothing, use that opportunity to say, okay, well, how have I created this? Is the reality that they're afraid to give me feedback? Is the reality that I'm perfect and there's nothing I could do better? Then awesome, but probably not. Right? Like, let's get into that and then lean into maybe there's some opportunity for me to build some trust to prove to my team, I really do want to hear that feedback. I am open. I do have that intention to listen, but perhaps over time, unintentionally, you've created a circumstance where they don't feel like you are, or they don't feel like there's space for that. Absolutely. There is so much possibility if you can change that experience. And what might be possible if your folks were willing to come to you at every moment and say, gosh, I've got this great idea, or, oof, you said that thing to me and that really shut me down. And I don't think you really heard my idea thoroughly, or whatever the case might be. I can think of a handful of organizations at this moment who are experiencing tremendous crisis. And had they had this behavior built into their leaders, what might have been possible? How might we avoided some of these really big crises we have in big organizations right now, if only their leaders had that simple practice of asking that powerful question you just articulated?
Well, reflecting back on your leadership journey, is there anything different along the way or anything that you would have done differently along the way, knowing what you know now about leading teams, those relationships, doing all that really effectively?
I think it's easy to look back on anyone's journey and say, oh, if I'd only done this, if I'd only done that, and it is also easy to be sitting in a place of appreciation and saying, if I had done that, things might have turned out differently. And I'm grateful for the path and journey I've been on. But somebody shared something with me recently that's really resonated, and I wish I would have known it sooner. So I'll share that. I have two little girls, they're 8 and 9, and their favorite fruit is strawberries. Strawberries above all, right? It's their absolute favorite, my favorite too. And someone shared with me recently, imagine you were a strawberry and you were the most beautiful, perfect, red, juicy, ripe strawberry on earth. Most people are going to like that. However, the reality of humanity is some people don't like strawberries. They just don't. There's no logic to it. I can't begin to understand it because I love them, but some people don't like strawberries. And even more importantly, some people are allergic to them and there's nothing they can do about it. They're just allergic to them. So it does not matter how much you dip yourself in chocolate and spin around twice. They don't like strawberries or they're allergic to them. And there's nothing you can do about that. And so coming back to that authenticity and awareness of who are you and are you appreciative of who you are and leaning into those things that you really like about yourself and using that to be authentic in your leadership. I think that that's really important. I think especially for leaders coming into leadership in the beginning, they try to be something that everyone's going to like. And at the end of the day, not everybody's going to like you, even if you're a perfect strawberry, right? And so you just have to be able to say, this is who I am authentically. I'm going to do the best that I can do with a whole heart and an honest heart. And that's the best I can do. And there's nothing I can do about the people who are just allergic, right? So I wish I would have had that insight a little bit sooner.
Well, finally, as we're wrapping up, I really want to kind of get to the parallels of a couple of the loves of your life. And in the realm of caring for horses, the relationship between that horse and that caretaker it is built on a deep sense of trust and understanding that's unspoken, right? There's no words that you're going to be able to say that really form that. It is an unspoken sense of trust and understanding. And so from your perspective, when you think about the principles of how patience and empathy and communication that are pivotal in equestrian care, how do those translate into effective leadership and strategies? Like, what are the parallels there between the two?
So my horse Aspen got new shoes on a couple of weeks ago. Brand new shoes. He usually doesn't wear shoes on his back feet. He doesn't need them. But we put some new shoes on for health reasons for him. And it was the first time in a long time he's had those shoes put on. And he is normally the calmest, sweetest, most understanding boy on the planet. And he freaked out, terrified, jumping around, snorting, snot everywhere, absolutely freaked out. And I'm thinking, who is this guy? What is happening inside your head? And I can't speak to him. He doesn't speak English. We've been together for a number of years now. And even still, there was nothing that I could do to calm him down, to settle him down really, really quickly. And it just took time and proving to him, I'm still right here. You're still safe. Everything's fine. And that story, I think, is useful when we think about trust and leadership. It takes many years to build trust, to convince someone that I'm here, I'm going to take care of you, I'm going to help you, and I'm on your side. It takes a long time to prove that. And you will still have moments where things go sideways and you've got to be that calming, still presence and say, I'm still right here. And I will be here for you and help you through whatever is going on because we've built that trust. We've built that relationship. And even if I've proven it over and over and over again for years, I'm going to prove it again in this really hard circumstance. And so when we think about trust as leaders, remembering that it takes time to build it and that in every interaction with your people, you're either moving closer to a trusting relationship or moving further away from a trusting relationship. And it takes all of your effort and remembering to say, I'm going to be the one that they can come to and count on when things go sideways, because things will go sideways at some point. It's going to happen. And I'm going to take every interaction, every moment to build that trust and to make myself be that place where they can come when things have gone sideways so that we don't end up with big blowout situations down the road or have trust that has disappeared and you didn't realize it was disappearing. So I think it's just continuing to have that awareness of the effort it takes to build trust and to continue to build it over and over again with your people.
Yeah. And that makes me think about the fact that, again, like if you wouldn't have known that he just got new shoes on, you wouldn't know the problem. You would just recognize there's something happening. He's expressing non-verbally expressing that something's going on, similar to sometimes when things are extenuating circumstances are happening with our people and our team. And so sometimes we won't know what those things are. Sometimes those are kind of personal issues, something that's manifesting in a way that's coming out in leadership. And it's not necessarily they're coming to you saying, hey, here's the issue. And so it's almost like that thoughtful exploration and intention to figuring out what's going on so that you can best help them navigate that. And maybe that's just presence. Maybe that's a sense of understanding that they are going through something. But I think equally as much as you would provide that care from an equestrian perspective, you knew that he had just gotten his shoes on. So you knew, okay, this is what's off, right? Let me just stay patient, stay present, help him navigate this. Same thing I would encourage leaders to, if you don't know what's going on, stay patient, stay present. Try to help navigate through the situation, even if you're not getting verbal communication about it. Sometimes it's in presence, or sometimes it's in the nonverbal, the ways that someone is acting or responding to situations, to just try to be insightful around.
Oh, I love that. Stay present, stay patient. And my build would be get curious. Get curious. What might be going on? If I come back to one of those foundational skills of delegation, you've delegated a task to somebody. You thought they would be super jazzed because it's something you are like, oh, this is such a cool project. I can't wait to give this to Susan on the team. She's going to kill it. She's going to love it. And you realize she's not delivering the way you thought that she would be. Maybe she wasn't as excited about that task as you thought she might be. Maybe she doesn't have the foundational skill set to be able to deliver on that task, and you didn't know. You just assumed she had it, and she doesn't. Maybe there's something going on at home. I don't know what's going on with Susan, but getting into that curiosity to say, I'm seeing something that's not quite right. I want to get curious about why it's not quite right and not apply my own assumptions to that and my own solutions until I've done those things, of being patient, of being present, and being curious so that I can understand more what solution she needs in this circumstance. And I think that if you repeat that formula over and over again, it is an incredibly powerful way to build trust.
Well, that is a beautiful bow to wrap this episode up. Thank you so much for just the insights and sharing of your experiences. I think they're incredibly insightful. You have something kind of exciting going on in your coaching. You have had a wait list for a considerable amount of time, and you may have some opening coming in May. And so I want to make sure, for those who want to find out more about you, connect with you, or go straight to like, hey, how would I book some coaching or an exploratory call? Where can they find you?
Yeah, I'm really excited about this because it's one of the first times I've had openings coming up in quite some time. So if that's something that sounds like it might be a good fit, you want to get curious about that, you can find me on LinkedIn. I spend quite a bit of time sharing and posting there. That's a great place to find me. And then we'll also link my website. You can find out about what some of those programs and courses are, and then how to book time to get on my calendar right on my website.
Awesome. Well, I will put all of that in the show notes so you can easily click down when this episode goes live and find exactly where to go. Summer, thank you so much for your time and just fully showing up for the audience today.
Oh, my pleasure.
Thank you so much for listening and for being here on this journey with me. I hope you'll stick around. If you liked this episode, it would mean the world for me if you would rate and review the podcast or share it with someone you know may need to hear this message. I love to hear from you all and want you to know that you can leave me a voicemail directly. If you go to my website, evokegreatness.com, and go to the Contact Me tab, you'll just hit the big old orange button and record your message. I love the feedback and comments that I've been getting, so please keep them coming. I'll leave you with the wise words of author Robin Sharma. Greatness comes by doing a few small and smart things each and every day. It comes from taking little steps consistently. It comes from making a few small chips against everything in your professional and personal life that is ordinary, so that a day eventually arrives when all that's left is the extraordinary.